Two guys in the dark.
It was very early in the morning, around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I was in a very open area waiting for my boss to return with some equipment. As I was waiting, I got that feeling like I was being watched by something, and that it didn't want me there, and had some intent on harming me. I stood up, looked around. The moon was very bright that night, and I could clearly see all the way to the tree lines. It was probably about 50 yards on both sides of me. Nothing was around. I calmed down a bit, took my pack off my back to get my drink out. As I opened up my drink, I hear this whoosh, whooshing sound flying through the air from behind me. It was like the sound that sticks make if you throw it overhead. I literally dove out of the way with my bag falling to the ground, my drink flying through the air, spilling as I jumped away. I recovered from my diving experience. I take my radio out of my bag to radio my boss. I go, "I'm not trying to freak you out or anything, but I'm on my way back to the shop. I just had something thrown at me." And I'm talking to him. I'm looking around on the snowy ground for anything that could have been hurled at me. There was nothing on the ground but snow. I had no idea what the hell was going on at this point. His reply is, "I've already got a head start on you. I'll see you there." Sounded out of breath, like he was running. I gathered my stuff, started hauling ass back to the shop. I get back there and meet up with my boss. He's pacing back and forth in our shop, freaking out. I get him to calm down. He tells me that he was on his way back up to me when he got the same feeling that I got before something was thrown at me. He said after he got that feeling, he stopped to look around. Heard something clearly two-legged started walking towards him, barely crunching in the snow. Then he said it started running at him, but there was nothing in sight. All of the sound of movement had stopped, and he froze to listen for more sounds. Then he told me that a hot breath was hitting the back of his neck. He proceeded to freak out. He said that he ran the whole way back to the shop. About halfway back is when he heard me on the radio. The crazy part about this whole thing is the area that we were working in has several burial mounds in the woods from Native Americans. Apparently, there also used to be an altar of some kind made out of stone that was buried during a construction project a few decades ago. This is actually my ex-girlfriend's story. Her and a few friends, 2 girls and a guy, went camping to a remote place in the woods just for fun. It was like a little turnaround near a random Forest Service road. The guy friend, who I'll refer to as Manly Man, was actually a scared twip. Hated sleeping in the woods, but for whatever reason loved being out there. In order to alleviate his fears, he brought a dose of sleeping aid. It was either Ambien or OTC, Benadryl, I really don't remember. Fast forward to around dusk. They're enjoying a fire, generally jesting or when a truck rolls up. Lifted, loud, you know the type. One guy gets out of the passenger door. Another one stays in the cab. They want directions to somewhere that no one has heard of, and want to use a phone since they have no service on theirs. After being told that no one else has service, he starts asking questions like, "Is it just the 4 of you up here? Did you know that there are bears?" Which there really aren't, especially in the Oregon Valley. Are you carrying any protection from wild animals? Rather annoying and innocuous kind of stuff, until fast forward again to the middle of the night when Manly Man is thoroughly knocked the fuck out. The headlights pop up on the road. An engine rolls closer. My girlfriend suddenly wakes up. She's spooked. The engine stops. The headlights cut. No noise for a couple of minutes, and then suddenly rustling. Girlfriend wakes up, and they all start freaking out and trying to rouse Manly Man. Eventually he wakes up and groggily agrees that the rustling is real. He is a bit nervous at this point. They listen for a little while longer. After the noise gets closer, they start shouting out, "Who's there?" and all that kind of stuff. But there's no answer. The rustling stops. Needless to say, they threw their camping stuff in the trunk and got the hell out of there. They passed the same truck a bit down the road, but no one was inside. Either those pricks were playing a prank, or legit up to shitty things. But either way, That's definitely not how you want to be woken up. As I sat in the dark in the tree stand, I kept having that feeling of being watched. Now I have hunted, camped, and grew up in the woods. I'm completely at home, day or night, in the darkest, deepest swamps. I've never had this feeling before. I just couldn't put my finger on it. When I was slithering down later that morning, I saw something out of the corner of my eye about the same time that I had heard it. I heard the crash, and just barely caught sight of something through the palmetto parallel to me. Now I say barely, because it looked like a huge, brown dog. Honestly, at first, I thought it was just a buffalo. It crashed through the thicket, and I heard it hit water. Sounded like a herd of hogs plowing the trees. Around 2 or so that afternoon, I had been sitting in the stand maybe an hour or so when I heard a faint splash of hogs across the thicket in the swamp. As it got louder, I began getting pretty nervous. It was so weird because I have never felt that way before. Well, what I thought was a bunch of hogs turned out to be one single critter. When it was within 100 yards, I could hear it plain and clear. Whatever it was in no hurry and stayed out of sight. I scouted the area. I knew the water the creature was in was waist deep to me. I could hear the splash, drip, 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 splash, as it put one foot in front of the other real slow, like it was trying to be quiet. I thought it might be another person, till I thought about how deep the water actually was. I could never point a gun at the noise or anything. I wasn't planning to kill dead at least. But as that noise got louder, I was looking down the barrel. I was actually shaking. The creature eventually got on the edge of the water, within about 40 yards of the thicket before the open ground between us. It crashed about 10 or 15 yards, and then suddenly went quiet. Like deathly quiet. There was no frogs, no crickets, no birds, nothing. I might have just imagined it, but I thought I could hear something every now and then. Like it was slipping in on me. It was getting dark by then, and to say that I was shaken would be an understatement. I never saw or heard anything else that evening, but I was so put off by the sound that I left my bag hanging on a nail in the stand. It was 2 days before I got the nerve up to go back after my bag. But when I returned, the bag was gone. The bark of the tree had been scratched and clawed to hell. I have not been back to that swamp. I've told only a few people about this creature, but no one believes me. My wife and I were camping back in 2010. We had spent 52 nights in the backwoods that year. Every weekend, we would get a remote out on Vancouver Island and enjoy the solitude. We were on a beach a good distance from anywhere. We happened to have a fire going. To get to the trail to leave the beach was a kilometer along the beach, 2 kilometers to the road through the forest. There was nobody there except for a guy named Leon from New Zealand that we happened to meet earlier on the beach that was planning on sleeping in his van up at the road. We invited him down to the beach for the fire. We brought a bottle of wine that we could all share. He had came out, and we talked about all sorts of things. We kept hearing female voices from what sounded like behind us in the bushes. I had figured that it was just someone who had anchored offshore, and it was the sound bouncing off in a weird way. All of us acknowledged that we could hear the voices. It was getting late, so Leon had hiked out to his van. We stoked the fire because my wife was completely creeped out. We stayed up very late. The voices had stopped, so we decided to put out the fire and just go to bed. We had scanned the cove with a flashlight several times looking for boats that could be the source of the talking. It must have been around 3 o'clock in the morning. We decided to finally go to bed. About 15 minutes after we lay down, we heard footsteps in our camp area, over by where the fire was. They came from the direction of the bushes towards the inland, right behind us. That direction was not traversable by people. We just lay there, hoping that it was a bear or something, because the island only has black bears, and they are easy to deal with. The footsteps went from the fire, then over to our tent, then back to the woods. 5 minutes later, the footsteps go back to the fire with 2 female voices talking gibberish, very loudly. They were having a discussion at full volume in the dead of night, very far away from civilization, without using lights to navigate through dense brush, relatively quiet, in a direction that we considered impassable. After they were done at the fire pit area, they walked over to our tent, still talking at loud volumes. They stood over us and talked for a few seconds, then went completely dead as night silent. Then they went back into the woods, never to be seen or heard from again. We just laid there completely frozen, afraid for who knows how long. We woke up around 11 o'clock in the morning the next day because we had such a late night. That was the last night that we stayed outside for at least a year. So I used to hear a ton of stories about ghosts and also watch a lot of horror movies. But since I had never experienced any ghost encounters, I was just a guy that was like, meh, these ghost things are created by humans just to make money while making movies about it and all other serials featuring ghost hunters. Alright, let's get on to the story. One day, me and my two friends visited the spooky forest. Not nearby, but we managed to get there just to check it out, as we love the natural atmosphere. You know, giving my lungs some adrenaline of fresh air. The time we reached there was about 7 p.m., when it was already getting dark. And just to let you know, there's no light source in the forest except for the entrance and exit of the forest area, so it was much darker than we expected. My friend had his Apple, and I had my Tab with dual flash, so we decided to use them to at least see each other. An hour had passed by while we were having conversation and smoking cigarettes. We were sitting under a tree, as it was thick enough for all of us to lay our backs on and sit and relax. We were having a good time until we started hearing a sound, like two rocks are smashing into each other, or one rock smashing on the ground, again and again. We were pretty confused. I told my friend that it must be a cat trying to climb a tree, making the weak branches fall off, making it sound like the rock thing. But it didn't stop for like 3 or 4 minutes. Now, after some minutes that had passed, it stopped for a little while. We were still assuming that it was an animal doing these sounds. Things went silent for 5 minutes. We started our conversation about this forest's atmosphere being so windy and cold. Then apparently a rock fell on my friend's head. I wonder how a rock can be up there on a tree. Just in 4 or 5 seconds, a small branch from the tree fell on my lap, scaring the shit out of me. And once again my friend felt like water drops falling on his neck from up the tree. How is there still a chance of water dropping from a tree when the rainy season was already over 2 months ago? This night was clearly not our lucky night, as we heard the same sound of the rock smashing once again, but now it sounds like it's getting closer. Immediately, without any options to choose, we decided to run out of the forest as quickly as we could. We left the forest safe and sound and headed to our homes. After a few days of the incident, one of our friends posted in the news about the same forest. There was a huge tower just like a lighthouse, as said by the post. We saw that tower from a distance, but didn't get closer as it was a rocky area, and there is a chance that one of us might fall off the small cliff. So in the post, a boy was passing by the tower, and the first thing he saw was a person, but only his head. The post also said the police couldn't find the body, but also just the head of the man, which was already found by the same person who saw it while passing by. The question is, what happened to this guy? How in the world can this ever happen to someone? It could be the drug addicts who make this forest to go and get high with brown sugar, or this guy is a drug addict getting his head torn off by someone. The weird experience we had a few days ago in the same forest. Was the same guy doing it after death? My questions are yet unanswered, and I never visited that forest again, and neither did anyone else.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.